Hello. I stand here before you today not only because I am passionate about Mongolia, but also because, like all TED speakers, I want to change the world. Don't we all want to change the world sometimes? The way I hope to achieve this is by producing a documentary series to help Mongolians better choose how you wish to participate in this ever more globalized world, and also to help non-Mongolian audiences better understand this ancient culture and perhaps even see ourselves in a new light. But before I tell you more about the project as such, let me tell you what brought me to it. I traveled to Mongolia for the first time in 2008, and I was struck by the fact that people here see and do things very differently compared to where I come from. I wanted to understand this further, and I went on to do a master's in anthropology at the University of Cambridge. I was intrigued by the fact that most anthropology textbooks talk about development programs more in terms of the harm they do than the good. So I wanted to find out for myself what the situation is here in Mongolia. I studied poverty, or more specifically, concepts of poverty. That means that I talked to Mongolians from across all walks of life and from different backgrounds, but also to development workers from different organizations and from across all nationalities, and asked them, what does it mean to them to be poor? What I learned was that here in Mongolia, traditionally, poverty is not just simply about the lack of money. It is more a moral and social relation, or a problem with moral or social relations. But what I also learned was that there is a huge gap in understanding between the people who work in the development sector and those who are the supposed recipients of development aid programs. I'll give you a little example. During my research, I interviewed many people. One of them was the head of a local branch of a particular large international development organization. To prepare for this interview, I read the report that this particular branch of this particular large international development organization produces about every country in which they do work. Now, this report about Mongolia noted from the very beginning that some of the concepts that this organization takes for granted and considers universal were actually hard to translate into Mongolian terms. During the interview, we talked about many things, and the report came up a few times. Soon enough, the person I was interviewing asked me if I had indeed read the whole report, which I had because it was from my research. He said to me I was very lucky. He was so busy at work that he did not have the time to open the report, let alone read it. What I realized is that too often, local realities go completely silenced in favor of the targets that are set by the headquarters of these large international development organizations. Now, where are these headquarters positioned? They're usually in so-called developed countries. I personally do not believe that there is a single developed country on this planet. We are all, as individuals, as countries, as societies, as nations and states, and as peoples, in a process of development. We are all developing. So what gives a certain amount of people or countries or organizations the right or the justification to impose onto another people their way of seeing the world, or their values, or their economic models? I think that we should, instead of doing this, we should be learning from one another and sharing the knowledge we possess. And this is what my project is about. Now, the media has far-reaching consequences and influence on all the people across this world. This is also true here in Mongolia, where you will find a TV set in a ger in the middle of the Gobi Desert, as you would in downtown UB. The media shapes the way we perceive the world and the way we perceive each other and the way we perceive ourselves as well. And I've noticed a tendency amongst the younger generation in Mongolia to disregard completely ancient Mongolian wisdom and traditional ways of life in favor of the very simplistic vision the West presents of itself. The thing is, this vision is not a complete image of how the West is. We too suffer from hardship. We have poverty. We have abuse, like we heard earlier, with drugs and alcohol. We do not possess all the answers to all the questions. We should be honoring alternative points of views. I am producing a documentary series that is for Mongolian people, in Mongolian language, and by a Mongolian team that will be looking at how people across different countries are dealing with, or have indeed dealt with in the past, challenges and issues similar to those Mongolians face today. This team will be traveling to these countries so that they can see for themselves and report in their own terms what they see. I'll give you an example just so you have an idea. For example, we could talk about mining. We all know that, that Mongolia is going through an economic boom on the back of its mining industry. But Mongolia is not the only country that has been through this process or that is going through this process. If we look at the 19th century, Great Britain went through a great economic boom thanks to its mining industry. But when that boom went bust, people suffered severe hardship. Thousands upon thousands of people had to emigrate in order to survive. Or we could look at Bolivia, where the mining industry that's been expanding has led to political strife and social injustice. But I am just a foreigner. I do not have the right to impose onto Mongolian people what you should be looking at and how you should be looking at it. This is why last year I organized a small competition inviting Mongolians from across the country and all walks of life to talk about their daily lives, to talk about their daily frustrations, their daily challenges, but also their desires and hopes. It's the content of the submissions to this competition that form the thematic base for the documentary series. Not only that, but a handful of the participants make up the team that will be traveling to different countries to look at how different people have dealt with or are attempting to deal with issues similar to those that are in Mongolia today. There you go. Normally, in development as we see it today, there's a certain amount of people or organizations that are imposing their point of view or their perception or values and economic models onto another. I propose we turn it around. Let Mongolians look at the world in their own terms so that they can find alternative solutions to the problems that you are facing. Because in the West, we are told consumerism, capitalism is the only solution to the problems we have. Yet it is this model of consumerism that has led us, in Europe especially, and in other Western countries as well, to an economic crisis. But not only that, but to an environmental crisis that has global implications for all people on this planet. Why don't we let Mongolians decide for themselves, make informed decisions? That way, decision makers on all levels, be they herders or mothers at home or politicians, can make better informed decisions. Because the quality of any democracy depends on the quality of information available to people. But that's not all. It's not enough. To present this model, which is in a way an alternative model to development, I'll be also following the Mongolian team with my own little team. Because this model can be adapted everywhere. And I want to present this way of looking at the world to all audiences, non-Mongolian audiences. The other thing is, if we're looking at the world through someone else's eyes, we can also think about the problems we face daily from a different perspective. Not only can we look at our global system in a different perspective, but we can also look at ourselves from a new point of view. In essence, what I'm proposing is that we move from the current form of socioeconomic exploitation on a global scale to embrace the plurality of points of views and thoughts and ways of doing things so that we can find solutions not only to today's problems, but also to tomorrow's problems. Because the solutions to today's problems will not be found in the models that have brought us to these problems. We need to embrace everybody's points of views and bring them onto the table. What I propose is that we move into an age of mutual respect and of knowledge sharing. And this, I hope, is a thought worth sharing. Thank you.